you for tuning into From the Cowboy State podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Michaela Getz, and this week on episode number 3, we are joined by Mr. Cory Williams. Cory owns Pierced Heart Solutions and is a distributor for CropX Technologies, so don't hesitate to reach out to him if you've got more questions about CropX and what Cory can do for you. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, Cory, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Go ahead and just, if you want to introduce yourself, talk a little about the company that you work for and everything there.
Okay. My name is Cory Williams. I'm a small business owner. I own Pierced Heart Solutions, which is a company that helps producers navigate the challenges of irrigation water management and incorporating technology to drive decision making.
Okay, awesome. So I got to meet you over at one of the Cody events, Weeds, Wildlands, and More, and you did a demo for us on that CropX technology, if you will. So can we talk about that technology a little bit, and one, what it does for folks who haven't heard of CropX, but then two, how it's helping farmers, producers, everybody like that in the basin specifically?
Absolutely. So with my company, we utilize a suite of hardware and software from a company called CropX. I'm a dealer for CropX, so what we offer is real-time sensor data through probes in the ground. We offer weather stations, ET sensors, as well as a whole host of hardware to help producers gather data in field. So
yeah. And why is that so important to those producers up here in Wyoming?
So not just in Wyoming, I think it has implications for farmers across the globe. CropX is a company that has sensors on every continent except for Antarctica. So why it's important is to be able to have replicable results year after year, right? We have dynamic weather changes year to year in all different climates. So how do we navigate those variabilities in weather and rainfall, especially here in Wyoming? We're arid, right? Yeah. So we don't have the challenge so much of having too much rainfall where other areas do, but we do have that lack of rainfall. So to produce a robust crop, how much water do we need? When do we need to apply it? And how much do we need to apply at any given stage of growth for whatever crop we're trying to grow?
Mm-hmm. So. No, I think that's super important. And I've never farmed, came from a farming family, everything like that. My dad, grandpa, great-grandpa, but they were the ones who were actually out in the field. And so seeing the way your technology impacts those decisions made of, hey, yep, we've got to turn on the irrigation for, X amount of time, or no, we have this kind of soil over here, so we're not going to do this idea. But no, that was super interesting to learn about your technology.
Absolutely.
And the company and everything. So let's talk about a little bit. Let's back up. So we talked about, you had mentioned Wyoming is pretty arid. Everybody has an irrigation system. So can we talk about how the climate and the landscape, how you've seen that work with your technology to kind of combat challenges in ag for these producers?
So here in the Bighorn Basin, like you alluded to, we are an arid desert climate. Everything we rely on for crop growth comes from irrigation. I wouldn't say everything, but 95% of our growth comes from irrigation systems. So everybody in the basin and northwest Wyoming have the same issues, right? How much water do we need to produce the crop we want? And so with that climate comes issues when we do actually have rainfall. Like a few years back in 23, we had a lot more rainfall in the spring than we typically do. Yeah. A lot of producers are geared up to irrigate on a certain calendar date, and they start irrigating. Well, as we all know, if we overwater certain crops, we have damage, or we can have crop loss. So this technology helps us navigate those dynamic weather changes. And what I'm seeing with most producers is it takes about a year to readjust to a weather change, right? So if we're getting hotter and drier or cooler and wetter, it takes us a little bit to be able to adapt to that. Well, by the time that season's over, we're into the next season. So we're always behind. So with this technology, it allows us to be real time, be able to make decisions based on data, and be able to change day to day what our strategy is. If we've got a hotter and drier situation coming, the modeling that comes from this suite of products allows us to say, hey, this is how we're going to schedule and get through this drought. Or if we're cooler and wetter, this is how we can manage that situation as well without going a full season and then trying to change after the fact.
Catch up.
Yeah.
So can you give an example of somebody that you've worked with in the basin who, sugar beets, the cool season grasses, whatever, you've worked with them to say, hey, here's this solution, let's get you on board, and then the success that they've had come out of using the CropX suite?
Yeah, absolutely. So utilizing that CropX technology really helps any farmer. So I work with sugar beet farmers, dry bean farmers, alfalfa producers, grass hay producers, you name it, corn producers as well. And in just about every situation, there is value to be added to their production. So not only reducing inputs, but producing a better crop or more yield. So, for example, this year we had my barley producers, for example, typically under their gated pipe situations, they produce about 90 bushels an acre. Anything that we have managed under pivot, which we're going to obviously see an increase in yield, but anything that was managed irrigation monitoring, we saw about 130 to 145 bushels an acre. So, there's a huge increase. And then on top of that, a lot of the producers that are selling like Miller Coors or some of these other companies for beer, barley, those companies will also give them an added bonus when it comes to per bushel incentive. So I think Miller Coors this year was 25 cents a bushel.
Wow.
So when you start factoring those things in, just the boost in yield is one factor, but then what that company is willing to offer for irrigation water management pays for the service through the year.
Right.
So we're saving energy, we're conserving water, or we're spreading that water out over that season in a better fashion, growing more crop. And then also we're not talking about deep percolating of fertility, especially nitrogen. So that's more available for our crop. So, we start stacking these things and man, they're beneficial.
It really affects the bottom dollar for everyone. No, that makes absolute sense. And you had mentioned pivot irrigation. So the CropX technology, does it talk to, quote unquote, if you will, talk to the pivot irrigation systems?
So yes and no. So CropX is partnered with Ranky Irrigation.
Okay.
So if you've got a Ranky pivot, CropX, we throw a sensor in the ground, we get you hooked up with the Ranky pivot, and it will talk to itself, right? Or talk to that pivot. What that does is it allows us to pull up our Ranky rain cloud, which is their app, and know what our moisture looks like, know what the prediction is for moisture usage over the next 7 days. And then it also allows us to create a prescription. So if you look at a pivot, if you can envision a full circle pivot, and then you slice it into pie slices. So we can adjust our irrigation per acre in a pie slice. So as our soil changes around that circle or our topography changes, that's going to change what we're going to need for water. So we're able to dial in a prescription through that pivot. So if you don't own a Ranky, so you've got a Pierce pivot or a Valley or something else, we can still generate with that technology a prescription. We'll export it. You'll get an email, and then you're able to import it into whatever other system, whether that's a Valley 365 system. So it doesn't talk or communicate directly, but we can very easily import those prescriptions
and manage that.
Most of my producers aren't Ranky guys, so they don't seem to have an issue being able to look at one app, like the CropX app, saying, okay, we need to add water to this north pivot or whatever. And they're able to say, okay, yep, this is what it's recommending I need. And then they go to their next app, whether it's the Valley 365 or whatever, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. So it's very easily navigated and integrated together without being connected. But
it seems like it, and that's great, because I think that's one of the blockades you see in technology is it doesn't always adapt to the hundreds of different systems out there. So that's really great.
Yeah, and CropX also is a great company to work with, because they're always listening to the producers, listening to dealers, and saying, okay, how can we improve this product and make it the best product on the market for the most of the producers. So. Right.
And I want to come back to that in a second, but you had mentioned working off of an app. So I think there's this common misconception that, the producers and farmers, ranchers that are adopting technology tend to be the younger or newer generation. But as you know, I'm sure you are well aware, I think the average age of producer up here is 65 plus. So have you seen that trend kind of hold true? Like, yes, your younger producers are adopting, or you see a mix of folks who are happy to use the apps and use that technology, because as we talked about, it does benefit the bottom line.
Absolutely. Demographic wise, yes, I do see the younger generation is more interested in it, but actual adoption is mostly by and part the older generation, which kind of bucks that trend. Most of the people that are adopting it are the more progressive guys, as you would expect, or guys that are working solely by themselves, right? This is a force multiplier. It allows them to look at all their fields daily, hourly, whatever they want, without having to travel to those fields every single day. So they kind of know over breakfast or the night before, hey, this is where I need to be. And I don't think that it really goes to a demographic per se when it comes to adoption. But like I said, the younger generation's more interested, but they're a little more hesitant.
Sure.
I think all producers are a little more hesitant to adopt technology.
Yeah. So. Well, and there can be so many things too that affect that. This is the way Dad did it, and this is the way Grandpa did it. We don't want to change anything because they were successful. So I think there's just a lot of small things that go into that.
Absolutely.
That you see. So back to the technology, which is the theme of today. So the soil moisture sensors, they work, you implant them into the ground, but what makes them so effective? I know we've kind of talked about, like your pie chart and everything with the pivot, but when we're talking about soils in Wyoming, why are these soil moisture monitors so effective and important for producers?
Well, as far as effectiveness, why they're so effective is they're actually out in the field 24 hours a day, collecting data every 30 minutes. So if I were a farmer and I'm going out and collecting a data point once a week, over a season I've only got maybe 20 data points. This is collecting hundreds of data points a day. So it's giving us trend line graphs. It's allowing us to know what's going on in that particular soil type, in that particular field, in that particular crop, with that particular growth stage, right? So, and as that changes through growth stages, or that your plant changes through growth stages, it's going to need differing amounts of nutrients, but also water. So it's a powerful tool, giving us real-time in-ground knowledge, what's going on under the ground, not just the surface, not just looking at a plant and what stressors are causing changes above ground. It also gives us telemetry, so it's going to send that data to our app or to our PC-based program. And then it's also giving us satellite imagery, so NDVI, Savvy, and Moisture Index, which gives us a lot of data to know, okay, am I watering correctly? Is my plant healthy? And if it's not, where can we improve? We've got that, but then it's also predicting weather. So it's telling us, hey, there's a weather system coming. Maybe you want to hold off on irrigations, one of these irrigations.
Yeah, you're going to get 3 inches of rain.
Exactly. Let's save a little bit of turns on these pivots. Or, hey, you know what? You're clear to irrigate. One other aspect we haven't talked about is disease modeling. So there's a lot of supported crops through CropX that there's disease modeling. Wheat is one of them in this area, corn. That gives us insights of, hey, weather conditions are right for X bacteria or fungus. Maybe you need to get out and scout. Or it also gives us spraying conditions. So, hey, if you need to
spraying pesticides,
if you're spraying pesticides or fungicides, it gives you a forecast for spraying as well. So, hey, should I be spraying today? No, maybe not. But the next 3 days at these time frames are pretty predictably positive. So,
and I can absolutely see like what you had mentioned, where the folks who have adopted this are maybe the folks who work by themselves, because you want to have the most effective time management that you can. So all of this that makes absolute sense.
And that's what it boils down to. This is more, yes, you're managing soil moisture. You're looking at crop modeling and forecasting. But when you break it down, it's a time management tool, right? How can I get the most done in a day and be most effective? Not efficient, but doing the right things at the right time. And this is one of the most powerful tools, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to jog just a little bit backwards. So you said that you guys take customer feedback, client feedback to heart, and are always making strides and improvements. So what are some of the improvements that you've seen from like the original product that you were working with CropX to where you guys are now?
Okay. Yeah, so when it comes to the hardware itself, over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been design changes. Instead of being a straight design, and they've got a spiral, kind of like a screw, so you screw them in the ground. There was a straight design. Now we've got a tapered design, makes installs a lot easier, extractions way easier, less breakage of the actual hardware. Replaceable batteries. Usually a battery will last for a full season, but we've got a different design. So now we have a removable battery. So if you do have issues, you don't have to remove the probe.
Just swap batteries.
You just swap batteries. Yep. On the hardware side, still antennas and cables and things like that for our telemetry, way better improved. Now on the software side, there's AI modeling, which has been added to that, better forecasting, partner connections, so being able to partner with like Ranke or Davis Instruments to be able to take a weather station, connect it to that probe, and get hyper local weather for your forecasting and modeling. Also that disease feature. So adding CropX acquired a company called DACOM, the UK, it was a couple years ago, and adding the disease feature, so forecasting and modeling disease in your crop and using satellite data to pinpoint issues. So
interesting. Okay. And so moving forward, what are there any current limitations in these soil monitors, everything like that you guys have run into, or that people are providing feedback on consistently lately?
Okay, yeah. The producers haven't expressed a lot of negative feedback when it comes to the service. But for me as owner-operator, I want things to be just right for my customers. And the challenges I see are cell phone service. So we've got 2 major carriers, AT&T and Verizon in our area. We have to have decent cell signal to be able to utilize these sensors the most effective manner, to use that telemetry to download the app. If we don't have that, then it's kind of a no-go. We can use it as a data logger, but you have to go out to it physically, download it, and come back out, which works. But that's the biggest challenge, is making sure we got the right carrier, making sure we do have cell signal. CropX has been talking about working on using different technologies, maybe like Starlink, to be able to utilize that, or kind of a mesh system where we have a base unit and then we can bounce a bunch of sensors out from there and kind of daisy chain them together. So that's up and coming, but haven't seen it yet. One of the other challenges is soil variability, right? So if we've got a lot of aggradation in a certain soil, right? So these probes that I use are 26 inches long. We can set them at a depth from 22 to 26 inches. So one of the biggest challenge in the aggradation is, okay, we've got differing layers of soil, especially in some of these river bottoms or floodplain areas. We're going to have multiple layers of soil. So what we're reading at 4 inches, 12 inches, and 22 inches could vary greatly, right? And anytime we have that differing soil types, we're not having penetration, so we're seeing a lot of issues that way. But that does give us a lot of insight for our grower to say, hey, you've got a lot of aggradation going on here. We've got a lot of different soil layers. Okay, we're going to manage this a little differently. The other one is just straight up soil depth. So most of the basin, I haven't seen a lot of issues with soil depth. But for example, on the North Fork here in Cody, North Fork shown, I've got some fields there that are, 18 inches of soil depth before you hit river bottom. So you're like, okay, a 22-inch probe into 18 inches does not work. So you got to get a little creative, find just the right spot that has enough soil to do it. The other challenge is very rocky soils. So we want to have really good soil contact to the probe. So if we've got a lot of rocks, you hit a rock and you're not having contact, you have some issues. But typically, that all falls on me. That's not the producer. I'm going to go out and resync that probe, make sure we got good contact, and just takes a little bit more management on my end. So.
Sure. No, that makes absolute sense. It seems like you have a really great connection with all the producers you work with. You're rattling these examples off just, like the back of your hand. So that's always really nice to know too. I feel like sometimes people get started in farming or ranching with both, and then they don't necessarily have any connections, anybody to work with. I think that's huge in this community, is making sure that if you need help, ask for help. You've got those connections, everything like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned disease management for all the different crops, the variety of crops we have up here. Have you seen an instance, or can you provide an example of where you've seen the probes help either negate or lessen the hurt of a disease loss?
Yes, I have. So in alfalfa, for example, we've got a host of different pests, right? So I've got a producer here in the Bighorn Basin. He produces alfalfa, but then also alfalfa seed. And he was chugging right along, and typically I have access to their data so they can see what's going on, but then every day I look and make sure everything's okay. We were starting to see a trend of a spot on NDVI. NDVI is a satellite imagery, and it shows the health of the plant and the robustness of growth. So in that field, we were starting to see a really good green up, and then we started to see these blotches in it. And those blotches were starting to turn an orangish color, which is, hey, telling me, hey, we need to go out and look at this field, right? And I don't try to step into the agronomy role. I partner with local agronomists and as a team. And I said, hey, this guy's name, we'll just call his name Chris. So I said, hey, Chris, here's the deal, man. I know your water's right. We can see from the road, everything's looking all right, but we're starting to see these blotches of something's going wrong. And he's like, hey, I've been out there. I didn't see anything. I'm like, hey, get your agronomist out there. Have her go out with sweep net and see what's going on. I think we've got either a disease issue or a pest issue. And he's like, nah. So we let that go for about a week. And I said, hey, man, I'm going to come out. I'm going to take my sweep net. So we end up going through there, and he's got the early stages of a pretty epic alfalfa weevil issue. And he had some issues, and he's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I said, well, we could see that a week earlier. Now, yeah, we're not seeing any damage right now visibly, but satellite-wise, we were. Mm-hmm. So that allows us, so in that example, if we would have said, hey, yep, there's something going on here, let's get out, and we had our agronomist out, we could have been on top of that before we potentially had any type of economic loss. So, I mean, that's one of several examples. You know, we get, you know, in corn producers, we'll see some things from satellite that we go, okay, it's not making a decision. It's not telling us what it is exactly all the time, but it's telling us, hey, this field needs attention today.
Right.
And that's where the disease modeling or the satellite imagery is powerful. A lot of the times we'll look at satellite imagery and start looking at different layering and say, okay, is this a disease issue, a pest issue, or a water issue? And that's where that moisture index layer comes in. You go, well, it's not a moisture issue, so it's got to be something else, you know. So that's been powerful over the years, just identifying, hey, what fields need attention today, right, and which fields do I need to visit today.
Right. No, that makes absolute sense. And I think having that like kind of aerial view, that satellite view, makes all the difference in the world because, as you pointed out, being right there on the ground, oh yeah, no problem, it's fine. But then what you were saying, it was a problem. The weevil problem is prominent.
And a lot of producers too, and this is usually the first year of using my service, you'll hear this quite common is, okay, I know in the water, I can see it in the plant,
sure,
right? Or I know when to spray fungicide because I can see when it needs it.
But that's almost too late.
It is. So we've got an economic loss or a stressor to that plant. If we're able to visibly see that and not take action until after the fact, especially in a water situation, hey, I can see that. I got this in pinto beans a lot this year was, I know in the water I'm good, and these guys are good. They're dialed in. But we can be just a little bit faster, maybe 3-4 days. Well, if we're 3 to 4 days faster on our irrigation than we traditionally do, I mean, we're adding more time of growth, more days to our season that we're in optimal. So, you know, if we're seeing those stressors with the visible eye, we're behind. So that's the whole trick, is to utilize this technology to be on the ball today as fast as we can and turn around, because farming is a terrible manufacturing process. Okay, if we've got any type of manufacturing process out there, maybe it takes us a week to get one run. Well, in that week we can change and pivot the next week and make sure we don't have any factory second widgets or whatever. Agriculture is not that way. You know, we've got one run in most sectors. You know, let's say pinto beans. We've got one run this year. We make a mistake along that. We make a bunch of factory second widgets that are not saleable, or beans that aren't saleable. We got to wait till next year to make that second run. Well, with
and
this
you're really never making it up either. Once you've lost your crop, you've lost it.
Yeah. So, you know, with this technology, there are example after example, and I could rattle them off all day long, but where we can see, you know, like the weevil problem, or, you know, we got a ton of atmospheric moisture, and instead of irrigating more and pushing our nitrogen deeper, we can hold off and we can do things based on data that we can't do with the naked eye or by doing it by the calendar.
Absolutely. No, that's really great to hear. And so when we were talking about moisture levels, everything like that, and watching the weather, what is the difference in maybe partnering with, and I apologize, I forget the name, but like that large satellite imagery and the weather monitoring versus maybe like a local weather station?
Okay, so those are a little different when it comes to the satellite imagery, but if you're talking about, a regional forecast versus a hyper-local, what I would call a hyper-local or centralized weather station. So we know anywhere across the U.S. or a globe, right, we get a regional weather forecast. Depends on what drainage you're in, depends on how far away from that weather station you are. There's going to be some variability. So like with a CropX weather station on farm, you're going to know what the temperature is, humidity, wind speed. If you add a rain bucket to it, we know exactly how much rain fell at that location, not just, over the region we got,
XYZ.
Exactly. Yeah. We know what we got. And now if you add that into the CropX system, so now instead, say we got an inch of rain tonight and we measured it in the bucket, it was in that specific field. Now we know we don't need to irrigate that 1 inch, right? Maybe we're going to schedule an irrigation of 1 inch out there and that would fill us up into the optimal. Now we don't have to, right? We would see that on the sensor regardless, but it's also more data to know, okay, how much atmospheric moisture did we get? How much do we need to make up with irrigation? That also helps with modeling. The longer you have that station, the more that model gets time on it, and it's going to be more and more accurate for your general location. So
interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really good point you bring up of just like the general or the regional forecast, because what was it, 2 days ago maybe, it poured over in Cody, and I don't think Pell got anything. Yeah. Or if they did, it was just sprinkles, which is not.
And some of my producers out of that rainstorm got an immense amount of hail, and their corn was shredded, and they ended up cutting it for silage. But, having hyper-local weather forecasting is a powerful tool. And then you can add in like ET rates, so evapotranspiration, right? For a region, we'll have an ET rate on any given day, let's say a 1/4 inch. Well, in your hyper-local situation, and if you've got a real-time ET sensor, you'd be able to know exactly how much you're losing that day. So you know how much you need to irrigate here in the next few days or in that week, what that crop loss was. So
interesting. No, that's really great. So does investing in this updated technology, I feel like one of the questions that I'm sure you probably always get is, well, how quick is it going to pay off for me? What's the cost versus, everything there? So what do you normally tell folks when you're like, hey, I know this is going to help you in the long run?
Okay. Yes, the answer is it always pays for itself. Every situation's different. Depends on how many acres you're utilizing that technology on. So say you put it in a 5-acre field, it's going to take a little bit longer to pay back than in a 200-acre field. Depends on the crop. It's highly dependent on a lot of factors. But what I have seen and what I tell my customers, for every dollar you spend with me, I will almost guarantee, I can't guarantee all the time, but I have not seen it or I haven't made this promise. So for every dollar you spend with me, you get 10 back. So say you spend $1,000 this year on water management or whatever that service is, you'll get 10 back. So you're going to get 10,000. Most cases, it's far more than that, which is awesome to see. But in that situation, it's like, okay, if you aren't utilizing this, you're leaving money on the table. Plus, you're not left. I don't just sell you the equipment and say, hey, good luck.
Right.
I'm there every step of the way. I help you install it. I help you learn the app. I help navigate the challenges over the summer or that growing season, as well as educate you on agronomy, soil science, hydrology, and try to, with my team, educate you so that you can get the most out of every dollar that you've spent. So.
No, I think that's huge. And, something that has kind of been, I guess, a theme of the season, if you will, is even if you're leaving the operation, you come back with some learned information to add to the ranch, the farm, what have you. And so to me, this is just one of those other avenues of, hey, you can go out, meet with you, get educated, bring it back to the farm, and have, exponential growth in that crop.
Well, and even if you're not managing all your fields with irrigation water management hardware, the things you learn can be implemented throughout the ranch, like you're alluding to, and I see a lot of producers say, hey, since I've learned this here, I'm implementing that on my flood irrigated ground. And you're like, oh, cool. And it spurs a lot of really good conversations. So
yeah, absolutely. So to me, this is such a jump, I guess, in technology from, kind of what we've talked about. One of the examples we've gone over of not doing anything, just using your eyeballs, etc., to actually having this monitoring. So what do you see, and not even necessarily with CropX, but just in general, what do you see as maybe the next big thing or big jump towards or in technology for Wyoming producers?
So I think, obviously, I'm partial to the water management.
Absolutely.
I think absolutely it's in water management. That's why I position in that, because we look at the Bighorn Basin, 95% of our crops are 100% irrigated, right? Yeah. And then across Wyoming, very similar situation. Very low adoption in technology when it comes to irrigation water management. Our traditional methods here, especially in the Bighorn Basin, was gated pipe. Yep. Now we're starting to transition to not so much wheel lines, but we're seeing a few more wheel lines, but pivots, right? So going from flood irrigation to pivots, that is a steep learning curve, right? And that's why I offer what I offer. To go from, help a guy go from gated pipe to utilizing something that's maybe push button on his phone, helping him learn the apps, and different water management strategy, right? Instead of watering once every 14 days or whatever it is, his cycle time, he's watering every third or fourth day, but we're spoon feeding it more than, flooding it out. So helping navigate those huge jumps. And I think that's where the technology is going to be at. A lot of farmers are already using, like RTK or some sort of guidance or variable rate seeding or applications on their fertilizer. You're going to see advancements there, but the idea is there. A lot of the globe, a lot of this country is utilizing irrigation monitoring in a big way. Wyoming's a little bit behind on that. And I feel that the future is going to hold true to irrigation water management being a bigger deal. It's the new gold rush, I think, when it comes to the environment is water. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of variability around the globe, in our country, volatility. And if we can do a good job every year, doesn't matter what the weather is, it's going to have a huge impact for our producers.
Absolutely. And that it makes me think of an example. I had somebody call in who I think they were using the gated pipe, and then they were just talking about, how often do I need to water XYZ? And that depends on so many factors. But what they were talking about is they were like, I just want to water less, so there's not as much labor, because I think it was just a husband and wife. Yep. And they were going out there 3-4 times a day, adjusting those pipes, turning them on, off, etc. And as you pointed out, with a pivot, you can hook it up to your phone and just, let's click that,
Absolutely. You get technology. I mean, there's good and bad with it. I mean, I've heard some serious horror stories where stuff didn't quite work right, but reduction of labor. We're seeing a lot of these ranchers going from, having an irrigation crew down to maybe 1 or 2 guys that are running all this irrigation. So they're going to adopt more technology when it comes to pivots or the actual distribution of water. But then with that monitoring, whenever we put a soil probe in, we typically learn more about that soil than somebody that's been there 10 years, right? Sure. So it's it allows our producers right out of the box to be successful and to learn a tremendous amount without having to experience negative effects. So,
absolutely. No, I think that's great. And, obviously, the theme of the podcast today is technology and advancement in your water management and soil moisture levels, everything like that. But if you had to give a piece of advice to producers, what would that be? Something to take home in their toolbox.
That's a great question. I guess the advice that I would give any producer is don't just follow your neighbor's program, because your program's a lot different. If you've got an idea, especially like when it comes to irrigation water management or something like that, you don't know, ask that question. There's so many resources, whether that's the Extension Service or Conservation District or the USDA or the NRCS offices. Reach out. And if you do want to get into something like that and you're scared of that technology, hire a professional. Hire a professional. They will deliver on what your goals are, and they'll allow you to learn as you go, and bring a tremendous amount of value to your operation, especially those operations that are a one-man band or a traditional family farm that has only a few people. You're able to hire a professional for a portion of the time to take care of, navigating, like for example, what I do, navigating that technology and learning that without having to devote a tremendous amount of time. There are resources, and they typically can help answer your questions. So
perfect. Well, that was my, believe it or not, last question for you, Cory. But is there anything else that you wanted to put out there to leave the producers with, farmers, just anybody listening to the podcast? Any other notes?
As technology changes, just be comfortable being uncomfortable and learning as much as you can about it, because as we go, we need to produce more food to feed our growing world. And we're going to have to push the trends, and we're going to have to push aside some tradition and adopt these new technologies to be able to be successful and profitable. That's the number one goal to our producers, is being profitable. So
perfect. I think that was the great end note. And again, the theme of the podcast this season has been be comfortable being uncomfortable, I think. Absolutely. Just through all of our different episodes. So that's perfect. All right. Well, Cory, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Well, that was Season 3, Episode 3 with Mr. Cory Williams from the Bighorn Basin area. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out. As always, you can reach me at mgetz@uwyo.edu. This has been a University of Wyoming Extension, Agriculture, and Natural Resources podcast. Thanks, y'all. This is a University of Wyoming Extension podcast. The university is committed to equal opportunity for all persons in all facets of the university's operations and is an equal opportunity / affirmative action employer. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this statement, please don't hesitate to reach out to mgetz@uwyo.edu and we can get your questions answered. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the podcast as well, again, don't hesitate to reach out to that email address, mgetz@uwyo.edu. Again, this has been a University of Wyoming Extension, Agriculture, and Natural Resources podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Funding for this UW Extension program is provided by the John P. Elbogen Foundation, Communities, Agriculture, and Rural Living Project Funds.